When Nikon announced the original Z5, I'll be totally honest and say that I thought it was a bit, well, meh. Now don't get me wrong, it was pretty affordable, had a decent full-frame sensor and felt nice enough in the hand, but for me, it never quite lived up to the competition, and so it kind of fell off my radar. But all of that has completely changed because Nikon has just come back with this, the brand new Z5 Mark II. And this thing has had a serious glow up. So much in fact that I'm starting to question whether this thing even belongs in the entry-level category at all. Because if this is Nikon's idea of entry level, then the rest of the mirrorless market might be in a little bit of trouble. So what exactly makes this camera a standout, and could it be enough to tempt people away from the likes of Canon and Sony, who have been dominating the mirrorless game for years now? Well, before I can get into that, I first need to talk about today's sponsor, and that's One.com. Now, unlike most other web creation platforms, One.com offers an AI-powered website creation tool that allows you to get your site up and running in just a matter of minutes. Simply answer a few questions and the AI will generate a customized website design for you with no technical skills required. From there, you can easily tweak the design to your liking using the drag and drop website builder. And alongside the AI website creator, One.com includes domain registration, hosting, and professional emails all in one place. There are no hidden fees, just straightforward, transparent pricing. Plus, 24/7 customer support is always available to help you should you need it. Be sure to get yourself a 14-day free trial using the link in the pinned comment below, and also receive 50% off your new website using the code TomCalton. Anyway, back to this. And physically, the Z5 Mark II doesn't look all that different from the original Z5. It has the same magnesium alloy shell, the same dual UHS-2 SD card slots, and even the same kind of weather sealing and weight class. Well, technically it's 30 grams heavier, but no one notices the fact you put on a few extra grams, right? But it's what's on the inside where this camera tells an entirely different story. That's because this camera now comes loaded with Nikon's latest X-Speed 7 processor, the very same one found inside the higher tier Z8, Z9, and ZF cameras. And this addition alone fundamentally changes what this camera is now capable of, as you'll see throughout this video. For now though, let's continue looking at the outside, because this is probably one of the most button-heavy layouts I have ever shot with. There are buttons here, there are buttons there are buttons just about everywhere. And while some other camera manufacturers seem to be insistent on stripping out physical controls on their latest releases, Nikon is continuing to lean into this button-heavy approach, which I, for one, am all in favor of. On this Z5 Mark II in particular, we are absolutely spoilt for choice. There are two proper command dials, one on the front and one on the rear. There's a joystick and a D-pad, just in case you can't decide which you prefer. And then, of course, you have a proper mode dial on the top with a photo to video switch just below it. But if that wasn't enough control options for you, on the back here we have a nice large 3.2-inch touchscreen that's sharp and fully articulating. Now above this screen there's an EVF, and while some might grumble about this being not completely groundbreaking, at 3.69 million dots and a 60Hz refresh rate, it's hard to complain all that much. But let's touch on autofocus, because that's where things start to get a bit spicy.
Hot and spicy meat. Yeah, boy.
Sure, it does share the same 273-point hybrid AF system as the original Z5, but this time it now benefits from dramatically improved processing speeds and subject detection performance. It confidently tracks people, animals, and a bunch of other things. It has better face and eye detection, and it just feels much snappier overall. The burst speed has also been improved, topping out at 11 frames per second if you're shooting in RAW, or 14 frames per second if you want to shoot in JPEG only using the mechanical shutter. But for faster speeds, you can jump up as fast as 30 frames per second if you're okay with shooting in JPEG only. And with two UHS-2 card slots, the buffer holds out for a fair amount of time before everything starts to slow down. But what about the video side of things? Because it's fair to say that the original Z5 caught a fair amount of flack for its heavy crop when capturing 4K. Well, thankfully, Nikon listened, and this Mark II version now records uncropped 4K footage up to 30 frames per second with 10-bit internal via H.265. Plus, it supports 12-bit NRAW or ProRes RAW externally via the HDMI, and that's a significant upgrade. Now, speaking of HDMI, the only slight drawback is that it still only features a micro HDMI port rather than a full-sized one, but I guess you can't have everything. On the plus side though, you do at least get things like focus peaking, zebras, N-log for shooting with a flat picture profile for better flexibility in post, out. You get both a mic input and a headphone jack port, as well as up to 7.5 stops of image stabilization. What's more, you can now set the camera so that it focuses the stabilization around where you have the active AF point set, which is obviously helpful if you prefer to compose using things like the rule of thirds and your subject is slightly off center, because this means it will keep your subject nice and sharp wherever it appears in the frame. Now, whilst all of that is pretty great, one of the bigger downsides is that when recording 4K 60, it's only available if you're willing to tolerate a Super 35 crop. And because this sensor doesn't offer the fastest readout speeds going, that means that when recording 4K 60, you may notice the effects of rolling shutter in your footage if you wobble your camera around too much. But either way, this is still a pretty confident choice for video work, so what about stills? Well, it should be no big surprise to hear that the image quality is just excellent. The 24 megapixel full frame sensor offers great dynamic range, lovely color rendering, and plenty of resolution to play around with when cropping. Now, whilst this is a backside illuminated chip, there isn't any stacked wizardry going on. But in most real-world situations, this Z5 Mark II really does seem to punch well above its weight. And I really am struggling to find anything of any real merit to complain about. Speaking of which, if you do like how these images turned out, then be sure to check out my presets that I have for sale on my website using the link in the pinned comment below. I've even provided a discount code so that you can get 10% off everything in store. Nikon has also tried to cater to those who prefer to shoot JPEG straight out of the camera, because we now have this little button on the top here, and that provides quick access to a pretty generous range of photo filter modes, a bit like Fujifilm film simulations. Now, I'll admit, some of these are certainly a little bit questionable. What the f*** is that? But the vast majority are actually quite pleasant, and all of them can be tinkered around with to better suit your own personal style. I actually really enjoyed using the monochrome filters and then shooting in RAW and JPEG so that I had high contrast black and white images straight out of the camera, and also the option to work up some color versions using my own presets in Lightroom later on, thanks to the RAWs. But let's be honest, you don't just buy a camera for the sensor, it's the whole system that counts. And until recently, Nikon's biggest issue wasn't its camera bodies, it was its lens ecosystem that was fairly limited, but that's also changing, and pretty fast. Because Nikon finally opened up the Z mount to third-party manufacturers, companies like Viltrox, Sigma, TT Artisan, Sirui, and Tamron have all wasted no time stepping in, and each month we see more and more lens options pouring onto the market, further strengthening the Z mount. In fact, whilst testing this camera, I've almost exclusively been shooting with this new Viltrox 50mm f2 that's an absolute dream on this camera. It's small, lightweight, sharp, fast, both in terms of aperture and autofocus, and the best part is that it costs less than a dinner for two at Olive Garden. No, seriously, this thing costs less than $200 brand new, and honestly, the results kind of speak for themselves. And as always, I will drop a link in the pinned comment below where you can find this lens and a discount code to help you save even more money if you're interested. Anyway, the point is, with more third-party glass in the mix, the cost of building a Nikon kit is finally starting to feel competitive again. And that's just one more reason why Nikon seems to be picking up serious steam in the mirrorless world. You see, I don't think the Z5 Mark II is just Nikon's entry-level full-frame option anymore. It's quietly stepping up to challenge some serious players, cameras like the Canon R8, the Sony A7 Mark IV, and the Panasonic S5 Mark II. Now, on paper, the Canon R8 has the most alluring price tag, coming in at just under $1,300, making it one of the cheapest full-frame options currently available, well, in terms of new cameras at least. But whilst it brings a strong autofocus game and has a great sensor, it still lacks any kind of IBIS, has a smaller low-resolution screen, less than stellar EVF, only one SD card slot, and a battery life that's, well, yeah.
Ah, well, that's disappointing.
Now, the Sony A7 Mark IV is a total beast, no question about that. I've personally owned two of those cameras for many years before I had to move to Canada and sell everything off, and whilst that might make me seem somewhat biased, I am pretty brand agnostic these days, and I own and shoot with a whole range of different cameras. So, comparatively speaking, I can tell you firsthand that the A7 Mark IV has top-tier autofocus, excellent image quality, and a rich set set of features for hybrid shooters. But the A7 is well overdue an update, and despite its age, it still retails at a significantly higher price point of just under $2,000 for the body only, so it's not the cheapest option. The Z5 Mark II, on the other hand, has only just been released and will cost $300 less than the Sony option, and I suspect this price will only continue to lower as time goes on. Then there's the Panasonic S5 Mark II, and honestly, this is probably the Z5 Mark II's biggest threat. With that camera, you get a full-sized HDMI port, 6K open gate recording, real-time LUTs, excellent IBIS, and a strong suite of video tools, all for $100 less than this Z5 Mark II, which is exactly why that camera is widely seen as one of the best hybrid bodies at this price point. The only compromise is probably the autofocus. I actually record all of my YouTube videos using the Panasonic S5 Mark II, which I'm using right now, and whilst the Face Detect AF is fine for about 80 or 90% of the time, it's still far from being the most reliable system I've ever used. Meanwhile, I would genuinely trust that this Z5 Mark II will actually perform when I need it to, reliably, quietly, and without throwing a temper tantrum mid-shoot. So, does that mean that this Nikon Z5 Mark II is a totally revolutionary camera? Well, in isolation, probably not. But context is key, and when you're looking at the broader picture, this is certainly a massive step forward for Nikon's entry-level full-frame lineup, and further proof that Nikon isn't just content with being known as that old DSLR company anymore. Nikon is now building cameras that aren't just chasing the competition, they're finally competing on level ground and offering real choice and value, which has been much needed for some time now. So for photographers or hybrid shooters who maybe haven't looked Nikon's way in a few years, the Z5 Mark II might just be the nudge that gets their attention once again.